Thanks for joining us for our webinar. Three of us on the team on the call here are part of Two Hands. So we're an organisation that's all about restoring trust and transparency and closeness in food supply. And so we've been working and achieved some awesome things to that extent. And we wanted to share with you, the journey, some things we've learned, how things are progressing for us. I'll just flick over to the next slide and then we'll bring up our faces after that. So, well, our faces are actually on the slide. So here you can see myself, Ben Pyman, Head of Operations at Two Hands. Then we've got Wayne Hayes, Non-Executive Director, Two Hands, and Wayne as well, Co-Founder and Director of Vital Business Solutions here in Adelaide, but I know you work all over the place. Wayne, how long has that been running for?
Yeah, VBS is probably about 25th year, so we've been doing business for a while, but we do a lot of work in Southeast Asia with warehouse management software. So yeah, we get around.
Yeah, and I bet the tech's evolved a bit in 25 years too. I can't even imagine more than about 8 years ago. So that's awesome. And then we've got Derek Munnicky, Derek, Head of Technology at Two Hands. Awesome Australian Adelaide business doing tons of work in apps. Derek, do you want to just say a couple of seconds about that?
Yeah. So obviously we've been working with Two Hands since very early on, moving their technology platform forward. Within Next Phase, we've spent the last decade or so working specifically with startups and new ventures, and bringing ideas to fruition. And Two Hands has been an exciting company to work with and change the world.
Beautiful, thanks Derek. And then we've got Henry Innes. Henry, our special guest all the way from California. Henry, you're CEO of GoChain, which is a company. Well, you give us 30 seconds on GoChain, and then we'll talk about why we've come together.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. It's great to be on this webinar with everybody. I'm Henry Innes, CEO of GoChain. GoChain is a global blockchain technology company. We help enterprises primarily with digital transformation, modernization. A lot of what we do centers around supply chains, and this is really sustainability, green, responsible supply chains. We also look a lot at digitized solutions that help to drive efficiencies. Then all of this we were able to do by leveraging our protocol, which we've designed in a very unique way with unique consensus that's really secure, highly scalable to drive adoption and the right level of decentralization. So this has been designed specifically in mind for enterprises in terms of adoption and the particular importance of scalability.
Beautiful. Fantastic. What a great elevator pitch. Thanks, Henry. And no one got prepped for a quick spiel, so I appreciate you taking the pressure off me on doing the introductions there. That's fantastic. In the background, we've got Stu as well running the live stream, who's pedaling really hard to get the resolution working for us, and I really appreciate you doing that, because I couldn't do this and that at the same time, that's for sure. Okay, I'm just going to pop back to our slide deck for a minute and just sort of hit as to why we're here, really. So if we have a look at the global food supply chain as an issue, and I guess what's going on there in terms of positivity and negativity. At the moment, IBM identified in 2018 that there's $60 billion of additional cost into food supply industry because of inefficiencies. And then PwC also had a look at things and identified really food fraud as a major problem, and identified another $40 billion of sort of waste in the system around that. So, in terms of, I guess, a business proposition, everyone needs an addressable market. We're a business, and obviously where there are issues like this, people will jump in and go to solve them, which is what we've done. But I guess for us, this is more about people. This is more about producers and chefs and consumers than it is the actual money itself. And I guess if you look at what the food supply chain is, what the industry sort of revolves around, basically you've got, in a sense, what we call a black box I suppose, and a lot of industries use that term, whereby producers at one end, work hard to gather and grow and catch the produce. They work really hard on quality and things like that. And then basically from the point where they might land the catch or have the crops harvested or have the meat processed, at that point they sort of lose control of where it goes, and they sort of become detached from the process. And then all the way at the other end, you've got a consumer sitting, in regards to high quality produce, in a restaurant, a 5-star restaurant, or bringing home, what should be a really premium product, that don't really have any guarantee or any sense of the quality of what they're consuming. And then also, in the end, don't really know if their product they have got is genuine or not. So that then opens up for food fraud, essentially. And, there are a lot of truisms that we share around the fact that in the end, don't really know if their product they have got is genuine. Grange Hermitage is drunk in 3 particular restaurants than is ever produced in an entire year, out of South Australia. And there are a lot of other things around that. We know food fraud is a massive issue. I guess the other issues are that in a market where you've got, what we call middlemen, and we're all men, it's not gender specific, but it kind of, it's just the way we say it, that basically you've got the capacity for wholesalers to farm around their business and to basically force prices lower by dealing back into the producers. So what you're seeing there is essentially that race to the bottom that we often talk about, whereby producers are having to work harder and harder and harder. This product is still going all the way into 5-star restaurants, but they're not really able to get back the full value for what they're working on and all the effort they're putting in. So, look, I guess we'll state that as the problem effectively in which we're operating to solve. And we've got a lot of technology, and we've reinvented supply chain, and we've connected people that aren't usually connected. We've got a lot of transparency. And before I hand over to Wayne to talk a little bit more of that, I guess the one thing too that I would just address at this point is, we talk at the moment about having what is potentially a way to mitigate, future pandemics. Now, that's not something that the business, would have dreamed of originally and set out to do. But, with everything that's going on now, with unethical food supply chains, and sort of wildlife wet markets and all these things that have evolved in this ecosystem, what we present now is a solution, traceability and transparency and ethics and, a really open market where everyone can see what's going on. We're really helping present an offering that then can reshape an entire industry based on the fact that if we're operating this way, then other people, will have to step up to sort of be part of that. So that's one of these things that that's sort of we've been talking about a little bit more lately. Wayne, I'll hand over to you. And looking at the live stream, looks like Stu's doing an awesome job, and everyone's looking a bit sharper and a bit nicer, still with that nice soft complexion though, which is good. So Wayne, we've identified this big problem. There's billions and billions of dollars in it. So what do you do, right? You get 10 of the smartest men and women you can possibly find, put them in a room for 6 months, come up with amazing plans, and then you drop this, this finished product on the market. I'm sure you're going to tell me you don't do it that way. Do you want to just tell us, talk us through the way that we've sort of evolved into what we've got?
It will be a short story, Ben, if it was 6 months, 10 people in a room, so we'd probably be finished pretty quickly. So, I mean, I guess my years in IT, it's, nothing worth doing is, it's going to be a little bit complex, it's going to be hard, and I think we've got a challenging problem to solve. I thought what I'd do today, just to give people a bit of a background to our journey, I'd talk a bit about our mission and objectives, before perhaps then getting Derek to talk a bit more about the tech in detail. So for those people who might have already read the offer document from Virtual or thinking about it, obviously there's quite a bit of information in there which we'll cover over here today. But I think hopefully this live stream will give you a sense of our thinking behind the document and what we've achieved. So to that, what was our mindset and how did we start? So I can see there some slides. What have we got there?
Yep, I've pulled up our tech journey and our mission there.
Okay. So just thinking about our tech mission. So if you think of the 3 points there for our mission, what I put first was I underlined our mission statement. So trust, closeness, fishers, farmers, chefs, consumers. For us, that's our journey. That's what we set out to achieve on our mission with Two Hands. So often when you are developing something or knee deep in designing and collaborating, it's easy to forget what the purpose of the mission is. And I thought just sometimes we should always refer back to that. So whatever we do, whatever decisions we take, we must always serve that part of our mission. Further to that, we've got stakeholders embracing our values. So with that, what we're referring to there is a fundamental principle about working with Two Hands will be ethical and collaborative. And that means that what we're looking for is people, and in the diagram, you'll see, or the picture there, you'll see fishers, farmers, restaurants, consumers, logistics partners. We really want people who to be involved in our supply chain who really want to act in ethical and collaborative ways. So we want to develop a culture around how we onboard people and the fact that they've got values similar to ours and are prepared to be judged by those values. And we'll talk later when we discuss with Henry about a curated registry and how that can help make sure that we have the right people engaged in our supply chain. The third point on our mission there is about developing an ecosystem being indispensable, and that really is key to us. We talk in our offer document about that being our moat. It's so critical. To get people to come to our platform and want to use our technology is one thing, but having them stay there and decide that using it becomes an indispensable part of how they conduct their business is really, that's absolutely fundamental to our mission. So, understanding that people often think about price and profit, that's understandable. People always think about that. But, if we are able to develop a system which is incentive-based around quality and performance, then that's brilliant. But also further to that, developing the tools and services around our marketplace. That becomes equally important. And I'll actually have a session a bit later, Ben, to perhaps talk a bit further about that. So just key objectives. So I've got 5 points there, and probably there are others, but I think trying to distill it down to the top 5. For me, having an end-to-end solution is really, really important. Anywhere in the supply chain where it's broken, where we don't know how the chain of custody moves from one party to the next, it becomes a problem. So any gaps allow the potential for fraudulent behaviour. And so whatever we do in any solution we design, if we're able to pick up every point through the supply chain and manage that with technology, then that just adds to the transparency factor of our supply chain and is an essential ingredient, I think. Embedding provenance and track and trace capabilities, especially around blockchain. So really key to our mission here is consumers, they will have trust and in our platform and the proteins that they consume, if they can see the provenance and the journey of those proteins. And blockchain provides us with, I guess, the underlying technology to substantiate that that data is true and can be trusted. So with each component in our supply chain being backed by blockchain, whether it's the holding facility, whether it's where we do the packing, whether it's the transporter, whether it's the last mile distributor, or whether it's the restaurant, having blockchain underpin all those sort of participants in the supply chain is really, really important. Thirdly, a unique user experience. Really key to having something which is engaging to, I guess, the end consumer, but also being useful through the supply chain. For us, that's our really key point of difference. So having a platform that delivers the product provenance with blockchain integration, where we can showcase the product in the region, is really important. If you look at other products in the market, quite a few people, we've obviously seen quite a few people have tried to develop a sort of a consumer-facing product where some have blockchain integration, some focus on product and region, but not really on the producer. And what we found is no one really focuses on the end consumer at all, being the restaurant and the actual consumer of the protein, the actual restaurant patron. And for us, we thought that this was a really unique scenario where if we could have this trifecta of, that the producer, the provenance, and the restaurant all engaged on a really user experience platform, that would be absolutely brilliant. And it's something that really nobody else in the world that we've been able to see has actually done something like that. The fourth point I've got there is about evolving our marketplace. So it's about people and process. And again, I'll circle back to this a bit later, but what is a marketplace? I mean, for us, you would have seen in our offer document some words around that. So the way I view it, it's an aggregation point for data. So it's inventory, pricing, tracking, performance, those metrics that you want to, and those data points that you want to capture in your supply chain form part of or underpin the marketplace. It's a place where people will meet. So whether participants, whether they're fishers, farmers, or restaurants, or consumers, it's a place where potentially they can meet. And whether that's specifically in a portal or whether it's actually via the CUX, our consumer experience app, or other mechanisms, that's really important. And a marketplace is a disseminator of information and a provider of services. So that becomes a really important principle about what the marketplace will evolve to be. And it's more than just tech. It actually is people too. So people think you've got some black box, which is a marketplace. It's just not about a marketplace. There's people involved in providing that. I call that the glue of making it work. And the last objective there is really essentially about, what are we, back to your point, Ben, are we building something or are we buying and integrating? So I'm a great believer that there are best of breed or point solutions that exist in the marketplace that, if they're there, I'd rather leverage those, and the value that we provide is in the integration. So how do we leverage what's currently in the marketplace and integrate that to our platform versus what bits will we ultimately want to build? So some things are unique and we'll need to build them, and that's our 6 months with 10 people in a room. Others will be what do we integrate? So, for example, a good example of that might be back end ordering platforms. Where inventory and ordering systems, there are so many on the market today, it makes sense to leverage those and integrate them to our platform to provide an end-to-end solution. So there's some of the objectives, I guess, around what we saw that wanted to be achieved. If we move on to the next slide, Ben, there's another slide there, I think.
Yep, absolutely.
Before we talk about process. So here, what I wanted to try and do was talk a little bit about the way we went about developing. I've got a lovely diagram there that explains a bit about the technology and the usability. Just to set the scene though, it sounds obvious that product market fit, we talk about product market, it sounds obvious that should be something we would do, but it often gets forgotten when you're totally focused on developing tech. So often you just need to keep thinking about what are we trying to achieve here? And the key to product market fit is research, research, research. And that means making sure that you meet everybody at both ends of the supply chain and in between. So that means producers, what do they want to achieve out of the platform, how they engage with it. It means our logistics partners, what they do, what are our expectations, how will they engage with our supply chain. And then again, at the end, the end restaurant and consumers. How will they use and digest what we have on our platform? And, a key to that is just research. You need to get in front of the customers. You need to do the research in the marketplace to make sure you actually make the right decisions around designing your platform. As our CEO and founder, Greg, often says when he talks about, with his background in international supply chain, he often talks about the road to China is littered with the graves of Western companies who failed to understand the Chinese consumer. He keeps drilling that into me, and I keep saying, yes, that's fine, Greg. We need to develop something. But as it's turned out, he's 100% correct. We could develop anything, but would the consumer use it? And would it become a brand that they would identify in the future? And so that became really important to make sure we had that deep level of engagement with restaurants so that they're part of the process and not just an end recipient of some tech that we develop.
I think too, Wayne, and I'm really sorry to interrupt, but on that too, obviously we're starting in Shanghai and in some other Chinese cities as we evolve, and then we'll be moving it into other international markets too. And I guess then that process, has to continue again and again, doesn't it, as we try and stay localized in new markets?
Yeah, spot on, Ben. I mean, every country is going to be different. And I know that if you look through the offer doc and we talk about Japan and South Korea, I'm sure they're going to have different drivers from a consumer and even a restaurant perspective about how they want to engage with that platform. One of the key things I think in our process here was, in terms of engagement, we spent a long time with our pilot partner, Waldorf Astoria, in Shanghai. And, it was amazing the amount of engagement they had with our people and just the feedback and the fact that they feel part of, engaged part of actually developing something. I think that was a really valuable thing. And I think that's something that's a real value add. I mean, we get this, as I said before, we get this real trifecta, if you like, of, the producer, the provenance and the actual restaurant and consumer all being engaged on a platform where they're sort of all connected in a way. And it's part of, I guess, it's part of our mission, right? So, and that's such a beautiful thing. So, and that's a real key outcome we've got to keep looking back at. So talking about product market fit. So if you look at the diagram there, I mean, I've just tried to conceptualize perhaps the process that we go about. So, obviously we consult, we come up with conceptual designs, we prototype, we deploy, we reflect, and we repeat. It's a bit like the old wash, rinse, repeat. To get to a product which is actually worthwhile, there is a bit of pain in the development process. And if you've got the engagement with your stakeholders while you're doing that, you're more likely to end up with a product which fits and forms what we call our minimum viable product to go to market. So the intersection of what we call feasibility and desirability. Customers desire everything, but is it technically feasible to do it? And so that's the old dilemma, right? So, we can prove that might work, but the users might say, well, that's well and good, but it doesn't work for us. So that iterative process, I think, was really important, and it shouldn't be underestimated that was a key outcome for us.
Yeah, I think that's great. And what you said there too, I think people want everything until they see it, and then it's not really what they wanted, or they really need the feature that then they don't end up using. It's that constant process of going back to really fine tune to get something that really sticks, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Ben. So, and it's equally applicable not just to the restaurants and consumers. I mean, it's like I said before, it's each party in the supply chain. So as much as, a lot of what we do is we focus around the restaurant and the producer, right? That direct connection. But, supply chain is really important. We have logistics partners that work with us, and it's really important that they engage with our platform as well. So there's no point in developing tech that they're going to go, well, I can't use that. So, and to the point initially about end-to-end supply chain, it became really important to make sure that all parties were engaged. And you just don't develop one thing for one party. It's got to be a total holistic view of your supply chain, which is really important.
And that is that a good spot to bring in Derek, do you think?
Oh, just a couple other points. So
sorry.
And I'll segue nicely to Derek, I think. So another point there in terms of, I guess, the sampling process around tech. So the smart tagging, I mean, obviously there was some sampling of the technology required to deliver our, what I call the data payload. So, and Derek will probably talk a bit more about that. So how does that work? What sort of technology do we want to introduce to tamper-proof and live product versus chill or frozen product, how that looks and feels, how it performs as a delivery mechanism for the information we want to do, and how easy it's to track through the supply chain. So, we've now got, as at today, we have a patent pending for a smart tag for crustaceans for SRL and crab, so which is really exciting, and hopefully that fits the brief what I just talked about there. And probably as a nice segue to Derek, I mean, obviously there was, in this process of iteration about feasibility and the proving of concepts, I mean, there were some incredibly difficult technical challenges to resolve. No greater one than the Great Firewall of China, but even on blockchain, a lot of what we did was, we developed it from the ground up. The delivery mechanism around that. So there were a lot of challenges, and probably that's a good way to segue to Derek to perhaps talk about the tech and how we solve some of that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks so much, Wayne, for running through all that. And I think, you hear these problems now, people talking about supply chain and so on, traceability and blockchain, right? Blockchain's the answer to all of this. So, what you go and you get a blockchain or you build a blockchain and you plonk it down and there it is. You probably wouldn't think it's that simple. And I guess that's what Derek's about to tell us. I mean, having been deeply in the development of this, from the side, there's so many pieces that go together and APIs and interaction. And, you need so much from the human touch at one end of tagging something all the way through to the other. So we've done a huge amount of work. Derek, you've driven that. Do you want to just sort of run through some of the components we've got and some of the problems we've solved and so on?
So, I guess the most challenging thing is, as Wayne said, is that agility in the business and in the processes has had to be matched by the agility in the technology. And, the reason why we can't just kind of, spend 6 months with 10 people in a room is because, things change when you start to actually have contact with people and in contact with the real partners and logistics. And so, really our focus and challenge has been, how do we build something to deliver the concept, test the concept, and then, in that cycle, adapt to the measurements and the feedback. The blockchain or the distributed ledger, gives us a backbone and gives us kind of this ledger and audit trail of what's happening. But we need to be agile to adapt to those different touch points, whether or not it's the fisherman through to the kind of the packing and receiving, and then allow touch points through the logistics, and then ultimately to the restaurant and the end consumer. So what we've built is, we built very much an open platform, but then also with those touch points. So we initially focused, very much on, does the restaurant want to see this, and, develop that consumer experience, and wanted to make that, kind of sexy and nice to interact with. And so, kind of data driven and, pretty. But then, and that's where we had to, make sure that we were delivering the data as close to the edge as possible. So, right, into China, right into those content and distribution networks, to make sure that the user has as great an experience as possible, and also for it to be multi-platform, multimodal. So, whether it's on their laptop, whether it's on their mobile, or whether or not it's embedded within their WeChat app, was important. So we had to, work through that. And the data that delivers that is the same data that's being captured, over in the southern Victoria and South Australia. So, we need to make sure we can ingest that data where it makes sense there, and provide it into the systems. So then we start integrating with the receiving systems being used, by the packers and the receivers. And then, as we develop further and we start integrating further into our logistics partners, developing into the kind of a more sophisticated inventory management system and invoicing and tracking systems. And again, we don't know what systems are being brought to the table by our partners, and even then, as things change. So it was really about finding the best of breed, as Wayne talked about, finding the tools that made sense, and then, providing the glue. So we have, the glue is the people and the processes, and then facilitating and enabling them with the APIs underneath. As we said, we've built certain processes, an API to link those things together, and where there is a gap, we've built an experience. So we talked about the consumer user experience, and then, the cook started to get, or the chef started to become excited by the produce. So, we built a restaurant experience to kind of expose that more to the chefs and stimulate them and excite them, and build out that part of the customer ecosystem. And then we built a chain of custody app, so that the logistics partners, they may have existing logistics software, and in which case we'll integrate with that. Otherwise, our CHOC app, our chain of custody app, is an important component to fill in those gaps. Wayne said, that end-to-end, and make sure that we've got data points the whole way through.
Can I ask you a quick question? Just something I was thinking about that came up before. I've seen a lot of these sorts of consumer end or sort of consumption end systems where people would have to install an app to then be able to scan a QR code and get some information. But, you know, we've gone another way with that, which is that nothing needs to sort of be installed initially. People can do it straight out of WeChat. Like, was there much, what was sort of the thinking behind doing it that way?
I think this comes back to, you know, Greg's point and, you know, Wayne's learned experiences. You know, you have to be cognizant of the market that you're delivering to, you know, that consumer space. And in that case, you know, WeChat is where people live. And I mean, you know, luckily for us, that has a very awesome, you know, QR code reader. You know, QR codes are a part of their interaction lifestyle. So, you know, that fed in very well. But then we talk about other things such as the Choc app, which, you know, is an app that should be installed for someone who's using it constantly. So it really was, you know, working with, you know, the touch points, and as we got further into the process and we got people using and engaging in the platform, you know, the consumer product or the restaurant product, and we had to adapt to provide what they are.
Just thinking here, it'd probably be a good chance to bring Henry in. Or Derek, sorry, was there anything else you wanted to say about this whole great firewall? A very important person in our company sometimes talks about tunneling under the firewall or jumping over it, and I don't like to use those terms because it sounds like you're doing the wrong thing. But yeah, do you just want to say anything about how we sort of manage to operate, you know, either side?
I mean, I guess it's just the regulatory environment we find ourselves in. So, I mean, you know, you also have a similar experience in Europe with the, you know, with the GDPR and, you know, certain obligations. But I mean, I guess the toughest thing really with working, you know, into China and, you know, a tech platform is having the servers there and being able to deliver stuff. And like you said, we want to provide it to the edge. And so, you know, there's a few hurdles to jump through to actually have, you know, the ability to host your app and your services over there. But we found once we did that, being able to, you know, transfer the data and having this kind of cached synchronization of data across both geographies, you know, allowed us to do a lot more and allowed us to be much more responsive to the consumers over there. So, you know, it's you know, it's problems that you know, we've faced all over the world. However, you know, the China experience, you know, has some other regulatory hurdles to jump and, you know, to kind of get certified. And, you know, it's been interesting to, I guess, not being able to just say, you know, Google will solve it all type thing, right? Yeah, so having to have those different deployments and work at those synchronizations has been important, and, you know, an important part of our growing and building.
Awesome. Henry, thanks for sitting there so patiently. And also, I have to say, the people tuning in live or watching us on recording for bearing with us through our bandwidth issues on the video side of things. But hopefully you can hear us nice and clearly, and we're being very engaging. And so, Henry, this is where now we're at the point where, you know, you think a supply chain sort of goes linearly like this way, but when we're now talking about at one end broadening out to a whole lot of different proteins that are dealt with in different ways, big things, small things, boxes of things, individual things, then going through different logistical networks, and then going into multiple locations at the other end, multiple countries soon enough. That's where, for us, the track and trace challenge gets really hard, you know, because you've got to be able to go so wide and do things in so many different permutations. And that's where, you know, I guess we're really excited to be working with you and with GoChain going forward. We've signed a memorandum of understanding where we've identified some areas we really want to, you know, develop together. And I guess track and trace is the first of that. Do you just want to sort of talk to, you know, what that's potentially going to look like and how you can help us leverage out in those directions?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. Well, first, I just want to quickly comment that it's been really great to hear and learn about the journey thus far for Two Hands. You're tackling a very difficult market, first off, in terms of operating well in China. And so that's a real testament, I think, to the team. And then, of course, we're talking about a very important industry. I think, depending on what statistic you're looking at, more than 10% of the global population's income is derived from seafood, aquaculture, marine, coastal biodiversity. So super important. And I think the extent to which we can work with Two Hands with our technology and the innovative vision and platform that you guys have built have impact in that space, we're really excited about it. And so when I see the MVP that you guys have done,
It works in market. We're pumping through the product. Yep.
And it does something that not many projects have yielded to date, is to realize ROI for the customers, to realize impact for the producers, and of course your business as well. So Two Hands is able to generate profit as well. So to be able to do that, showcasing blockchain, that's a real testament, I think, to the project and what you guys have built to date. Going forward, though, I think, you've touched on it earlier, where the vision is and where the strong future is really focusing much on the producers and how to innovate platform the digital marketplace to the next level, to make it better for better livelihoods, better income for the producers, better visibility, at the same time bringing a great product to consumers and to the buyers. And so in that case, this is where, GoChain, we have tremendous experience and domain expertise around supply chains. We've been doing a lot of work, as I mentioned earlier, in this enterprise space, in customized solutions. But we're also, actually, within a few weeks, we're going to be launching what we believe is a first of its kind platform, blockchain-based supply chain platform, and specifically around track and trace. So you can imagine we're just a single farm doing non-GMO corn, all the way to a large enterprise with multiple assets, thousands of SKUs. You need to have a dynamic platform, dynamic to multi-asset solution, multi-tagging solution, and also still be able to yield analytics and reporting functionality. That's effectively what we've built. And our first iteration is coming out this summer, so around the June, July timeframe. And to that extent, I think it's going to be wonderful that Two Hands is going to be able to leverage some of the innovation and the platform that we've built in this turnkey solution. And especially as y'all are starting to expand into other proteins, eventually you move out into the farmers and produce, you'll have the dynamic flexibility to be able to map out your supply chain and also tackle multiple assets. And then that gives you time. You mentioned, 10 people in a room or 6 people in a room tackling, limited resources to building solutions. That gives Two Hands the opportunity then to channel their energies towards next generation market. It's a very interesting public rated registry that will reward the best producers, give them the right visibility, the right incentives, and also will create great visibility for buyers to know who are the best ethical players within that value chain that they should be working with. And I also do believe consumers also will have the ability to participate in this ecosystem. So I think it harmonizes this whole ecosystem together. And that's where Two Hands, I think, can spend a good chunk of its time innovating while leveraging the supply chain and domain expertise that GoChain has in terms of our blockchain solutions.
Beautiful. That makes perfect sense. And I'm definitely excited about, exploring this further, as we all are. That's fantastic. We'll come back to you in a minute to talk about the public curated registry side of things. We are ripping through our time. So, Wayne, we'll come back to you, just have a bit of a talk about Marketplace. So a marketplace is like a series of processes and interactions between people. And so at the moment, we're achieving that nicely, at the scale we're at with the tech we've got, the apps that Derek and the team have developed and our processes. So that is the doing of the marketplace. But yet we're also conceptualizing that a little bit differently now in terms of moving into building something that's a bit more of a physical digital space to bring a lot of that stuff together. I'll flick back because I know you've got a great slide on this. I'll flick back to that. And do you want to just sort of spend a little bit of time running through where we're headed with the marketplace?
Yeah, I think when I was going through the sort of overview and introduction and objectives, we talked a little bit about the marketplace and what that would be. And in the offer document also, we really pay homage to the developing of that marketplace ecosystem is really important to our end product offering. So, and I think before I mentioned that, it's about people and process, right? So, each party in our supply chain, whether you're the packer or a restaurant or consumer or a logistics partner, they engage with the marketplace in different ways. So they contribute data to the marketplace, but they also consume data from the marketplace. So the marketplace itself then becomes a way for us to share information or as a dashboard or other. I've listed quite a few items there. So, in its core principle, I think I mentioned before that the marketplace is, what is it? It's an aggregation point for data. So whether it's the inventory, the pricing, the actual product tracking, the ordering, but more importantly, it's a way for us to, once we collect that data, to actually put some performance measures around it. So they become the keys for us to measure the performance of each party who participates in our marketplace. So from a packer, you might say, what's their performance in terms of speed, efficiency, recording of data. From a producer's point of view, it might be, what quality specification are we getting from each fisher or farmer in terms of the proteins or produce they provide us. And that becomes really important metrics to what Henry was talking about as when we look at ultimately with some sort of registry, as best we can to the performance of each player in the marketplace, so that we've got a tangible way of measuring each participant. So the diagram there goes into some of the ideas, I guess, the conceptual ideas around what the marketplace might otherwise be able to evolve. It could be right now it's basic pricing and ordering. Pricing, order, and inventory information is the basics of what people can get out of it today. But going forward, I can see that each party who actually has an appearance on our CUX is able to change their profile and actually contribute new content or refresh content. So that becomes really important. And I've got a couple of future boxes there. I mean, obviously, it's great to hear what Henry was talking about the track and trace capabilities of GoChain. And I'm sure there are some things there that IoT type tech we're going to be able to dovetail into our existing supply chain, which will be really valuable to us. And for me, that just basically is a way of augmenting the sort of chain of custody type stuff that we already have developed. If we're able to augment that with some tracking information about shock, temperature, geolocation, I think that really starts to provide you a way to measure each person in the supply chain in a much more granular way than we've ever been able to do before. And with that, we can then, evaluate and determine who are the good actors and who are the actors who perhaps aren't up to scratch. So that becomes important. And the last, perhaps, which I think is an exciting adjunct development for going forward, will be basically as a portal for information around what I call market intelligence. So, people, you have performance dashboards, of course, but there are quite a number of information sources which are industry specifics that would be quite useful for people to have at their fingertips. So market news about, in our case for Southern Rock Lobster, it might be around, pricing in different regions. It might be about FRDC happenings. It might be about industry news, blog posts. I mean, even ourselves and what contribution we have in these marketplaces and having our own comment. They become a source where people can go and like working with the marketplace because it gives me things that I can't get anywhere else. And beyond that, hopefully, the power of the marketplace is going to help us to be able to leverage things like business services for producers. So things like insurance or banking type products. And we're hoping that we'll be able to leverage some of the power of our platform to be able to negotiate better outcomes for people who work with our marketplace. So that's the marketplace concept. But the key to it is not just about a log-on portal where you consume something. It's people as well. And it's really important that I think that concept has got across.
Yeah, we've talked a lot, we sort of anecdotally about things like, the being able to message or connect with message via the marketplace for, the fisher that caught the product and say how great it was and have a bit of a chat and ask them how they're going. And, superficially, even getting that amount of connection just brings those two ends so much closer, that, that's really what we feel. I'll send your product off and get a paycheck, eventually for it. We're really, we're really working those two ends so
that's
close
where
together.
The consumer user app becomes a really interesting thing that I think can go in any sort of direction. Talking about that feedback to the actual producer, I love that idea. But I mean, with the tech, mini apps, and us being able to engage in a way from that platform, in ways for e-commerce opportunities, or even just previewing restaurant in a way that's never been done before, and the story about the fisherman that's never been done before. So I think there's some really exciting developments that the CUX of our marketplace, right? So it's not just about marketplace; it's about the UX is a really important part.
Yeah. And so to sort of come back to Henry now, again, we've got a little bit of time left. So if this marketplace portal where things happen, in a way, I conceptualize that as sort of the front end of interactivity. But then for true transparency and really to open this up, coming into what sits behind and around that is this idea of a public curated registry, which is really where we want to go, where not many or any others are sort of going exactly like that at the moment, in a way that brings that true transparency, accountability, ways of rewarding people, but also ways that people can monitor each other's progress and say, look, these lobsters were fantastic, but we've noticed whenever we use this particular transport line, the quality isn't as good, or they take too long to get here. And then people can really start choosing who's interacting, in the supply chain and who they want to use. So, Henry, I think this is where we'll pass back over to you to sort of bring us through this next section, and I'll pop up that slide with those few points just around a public curated registry and how is this going to work at a top level to back all of this transparency and so on?
Sure. So I think first, as Wayne was speaking about earlier, if you have this marketplace that is capturing all this data, and of course the foundation is basically you leveraging blockchain technology for a true auditable ledger to be able to verify these transactions, that becomes a good source of ground truth where you can start to have your solid performance metrics, right? So I think that's sort of your baseline to be able to define performance as it relates to the different stakeholders on your platform. And, you mentioned earlier about, you said this notion of race to the bottom, right? And I think that's so true when you've got a lot of engineers, a lot of actors, they're going to, take shortcuts, cut corners, they're going to do things. But when you have blockchain and the transparency that you guys are building right now, it's going to discourage, I think, bad actors or individuals who don't want to be transparent, right? So you start to weed out individuals, organizations that don't want to play by the rules, right? So that's one thing. Now, building out this digital marketplace, and in some of the preliminary, I think, discussions we've all been having, I think we can definitely see a very interesting development and very innovative areas, particularly around, we're talking about seafood and the rest of the ag ecosystem. But when we talk about public curated registries or even tokenized curated registries, this is a fairly nascent, in my opinion, a nascent concept, right? And there have been projects that are experimenting with this, but I think there's lots of rooms for iteration and innovation. So I think when we take this all back, first you've got the blockchain as a source of truth. Then if you do some novel tokenization, some element of staking, you can get various stakeholders involved where essentially, say, consumers can have a say in terms of their experience with the protein, for example. The buyers are able to see who scores the highest or has the most rewards. They're in the registry as opposed to those who get weeded out. And perhaps you have a other token holders or a governance element that can essentially determine who should or should not be in the registry, right? So you have all the stakeholders will have a unique say. There's elements for reward, not only for the producers, but also for perhaps individuals who are holding tokens, for example. But that's just an example for a tokenized registry. But again, the bottom line is that you've got blockchain, you've got information as a source of truth, and the digital marketplace with this registry will create an element in which everybody can engage one another to get to make some decisions about who are the best and most ethical players on the platform.
Whoops, I was on mute there. That was awesome. Wayne or Derek, is there anything you sort of want to just add around there to sort of bring that back together before we finish up?
Yeah, that was great from Henry. I mean, for me, and this was in the offer document as well, we talked a lot about the PCR. You know, at the end of the day, you know, a registry is great. If it, you know, to list the actors, you know, the participants in a supply chain and what sort of performance they have and why we want them to be in there and to score them. But, you know, it's at the end of the day, we want to make sure that anybody can look at that and go, well, how credible is the Two Hands marketplace? And how credible are the participants in that marketplace? You know, and whether I want to join that marketplace would be three things that I think will be unbelievable outcomes when you think about what we're trying to achieve here. In terms of the governance and the incentivization or the economics around how the PCR works, as Henry sort of indicated, it's a novel area, and I think it's going to require some careful thought. The one thing I do know that is if there's no economic incentive to curate the actors in a way which benefits me or benefits somebody who's working it, they won't do it. So a list is a list is a list. If somehow we can link the measures that we're collecting in our marketplace to that list and get the governance around that and the economic participation to make that a good list that has value, as I described, about the credibility and the people on the list and whether I want to join that list, I think that will be an unbelievable outcome for Two Hands.
Derek, over to you. Do you want to bring home with any more comments around there?
I guess, you know, backing the whole supply chain, you know, with the flow of data, allowing people to see the provenance and, you know, have that assurance that the tagged or itemized, you know, product is moving through the system, you know, then enables this kind of performance metrics and the registry. So, and then and that is what really then removes a lot of these middlemen, because now, you know, establish trust between all the participants, and at the end of the day, you know, allow the consumers to trust the producers as well. So it's, yeah, you know, the chain enables trust.
Yeah, brilliant. And I guess, you know, my thought to sort of bring that all back together is just that, you know, when a new actor like us goes in to do business in a different way, but not in a closed book way, in a very open way, very transparent, really honest, connecting people, everyone can see, you know, that really has the capacity to transform that industry, because, you know, other people will be able to see what we're doing and where the value is and so on. And then they've got a choice to make as to whether they want to keep doing business the old way, or whether, you know, this for them is something transformative enough that they see it as being the future, you know, with all the data, all the tech out there, all the ability to operate this way, but do it in a way that's really humanized, connecting people, you know, getting the producers back the money they deserve by taking people out of the supply chain that aren't performing or aren't really adding a lot of value. You know, that's just going to bring such a big change that other industry participants will want to be a part of, or, you know, or it's going to be really easy for people to make decisions between ethical, sustainable, transparent, you know, future focused, or that's the guys where you buy the stuff and they make the money, and, you know, and I'm happy with that. I think this has got such the capacity to be really transformative. I want to thank you all so much for joining the call today, and people that are on the live. Stu in the background working so hard to keep the streaming as best as we could, given the internet at the moment. just wanted to bring up this last slide just again to say, find out more about us at twohands.world. We are, which I didn't mention in the introduction, but we are in the middle of a crowdsourced funding raising round at the moment. People can join in with us, become a shareholder, be part of this going forward. Also, huge thanks to Derek at Next Phase, also part of Two Hands, but also part of Next Phase. Thanks for coming in and being part of this. From GoChain, so great to have you on the call, what is pretty late at night where you are. Really great to put the minds together and reaffirm, what we're about and why we're doing this. I just think it's such an exciting mission, and it's been really great to talk with you guys. So thank you so much. Talk again soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ben.
Cheers. Thank you.